this band room, which is this kind of back room down in the basement. I think it's an interesting detail that's not much talked about, that they talk about how the band room's been moved since the last time they were there.
Everyone, and welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jackson, that's Jacob, and we're back again today. Episode 3 of the season. We are fully underway and excited to be talking about another one of theater's best scripts today. Today we're talking about Ma Rainey's Black Bottom by August Wilson.
Yes, we're back to do another August Wilson play. August Wilson, of course, one of the most recognizable names in American playwriting culture, you know, up there with the Arthur Millers and the Eugene O'Neills and the Tennessee Williams, is this friend, August Wilson. The plays are excellent. They're historical. They have incredible literary power. They have incredible cultural relevance to America. And they're just heckin' great plays, man. I mean, they're just like, the characters are so interesting. The drama is so well constructed. The meat of what's going on in each of the scenes is as good as you could want. It's just an incredible like cross section. Whenever you come to August Wilson, it's an incredible cross section of historical, cultural, literary value and really freaking good plays.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a good. I was so grateful for the chance to engage it again. Definitely read this play before. It's a well-known play. It's maybe not the most well-known play of August Wilson's, and yet it is one that is near to my experience, at least, of having read plays by him and studied plays by him. So grateful for the chance to chat about it on the show today.
Yeah, of all the plays in the Century Cycle, it I think maybe 5 or 10 years ago, it probably would not have been one of the most recognizable ones, like just by the general theater going public. The Piano Lesson is going to be much higher up on that list. Fences is going to be much higher up on that list. But, of course, the movie that came out just a couple of years ago, which we'll talk about in the context section with Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman, you know, it really launched the prominent. Obviously, I want to be clear that I'm not implying at all that the plays of August Wilson didn't have prominence on their own before the movie. I'm just saying, and in terms of like the general recognition of his work among folks that already sort of knew about his work, now I think that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is probably up there with Fences in recognizability because of how incredibly well made the movie is, because of how incredibly strong the performances are, and to be really honest with you, because of the story about Chadwick Boseman and how his death intersected with the movie's post-production and release. That really, because that was his last movie that, you know, he appeared in alive, it really gave the movie a heightened prominence in the American cultural lexicon because he was also doing the Black Panther stuff at the time. And so I wonder, I don't know, this is obviously pure speculation, if not for that part of it, would the movie still have had the like really huge cultural firestorm that it was when it came out?
Yeah, that movie definitely like is a splash point for me in my memory.
Memory of course,
this play.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
So certainly currently.
Yeah, and it's also just like because of the fact that it's about like a real person, right? Like Ma Rainey, we'll talk about this in the context section later too, was a famous recording and blues musician in the early 20th century. So there's a little bit of that like. It's not really like quite a bioplay. It's sort of a fictionalized account of a basically, you know, an hour or 2 hours in Ma Rainey's life. But it has that like going for it in terms of its specific historical relevance. And it's just the music, right? Like if you see a live production or the movie, like part of what you're going to be engaging in is some really stinking awesome blues music.
Yeah, it's like not a musical, and yet there is music in this show, and the music scene as well is being examined in this play, and so it's exciting to have that as like another facet of getting to engage this story.
Yeah, and I mean obviously this is a play from 40 odd years ago, and it's about the 20s, so about 100 years ago,
right?
And This is always true of August Wilson, and I don't know, it probably will be for a very long time in the same way that it's true of Shakespeare even still. The observations about humanity and power relationships are as relevant as ever. I mean, the stuff that Ma Rainey explores with some members of the band in terms of how she's interacting with the power brokers at the recording studio, that's really incredible, relevant, powerful human observation.
Yeah, the way that like engaging with the powers that be in the studio, it's just good drama, and then just also good plotting, and then also just a great social critique as well. Excited for the conversation about it today.
Yeah, it should be good. Great play, great to talk about. Before we get fully into the conversation, we do want to invite you to head on over, check out our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/no-script-podcast. All one word, no hyphens, no underscores. Patreon.com/no-script-podcast. That's where you can become a supporter of the show. How it works, if you don't know, Patreon is that you select a tier. The tier corresponds to a monthly amount that you choose to give to support the running of the show. For us, this has been the case since we've had a Patreon page. The lowest tier is $1 a month, $12 over the course of the year. Even at that tier, you are a huge support to making No Script happen. We love this podcast. We love the chance to talk about plays, but it's just not feasible to do it without the support of the folks over on Patreon. If you're already a supporter, huge thank you. Please know that this episode and all the episodes of Patreon come from viewers like you. I hope that's not a copyrighted PBS phrase. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I mean, whoever wrote it should, because it was so well used.
It's strong. And if it is, I guess we'll have to cut that out. I don't know. Anyway, because of folks like you, this episode and other episodes get to happen. Thank you. If that's not you yet, please check it out. Patreon.com/no-script-podcast. We'll see you over there. And now back to the script.
Here we go.
So we already talked about August Wilson a number of times on the podcast. Not going to do a full introduction to the playwright. Just going to move right on to provide a little bit, as much as I really can in the short time we try to allot for this, of like the historical context of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. If any August Wilson play is probably an impossible task to do, even if we spent the whole hour trying to do it. And probably you could spend a whole hour just talking about the significance of August Wilson and the work that he did and how this play has influenced a lot of other stuff. So this is the briefest snippet of an introduction to that. Of course, as I mentioned, the play is based on a real person, Gertrude, called Ma Rainey, American blues singer, often called the mother of the blues in the early 20th century. Her particular sort of style, I'm not a musician nor a blues historian, so this is just me pulling from some online commentary about it. Her particular style, a kind of like low, energetic sort of sound, supposedly, at least as far as I understand, goes on to inspire people like Louis Armstrong and Janis Joplin. So she was a really influential like legacy holder of the American blues scene. And of course, the things that I do know about the history of music, blues and jazz become rock, become contemporary music over the course of music's evolution. This play, part of the century cycle, August Wilson's century cycle. These are 10 plays that all but this play take place in a particular neighborhood in Pittsburgh. And the plays track the relationships of the neighborhood to the surrounding community, the relationships between people of color and white people across the course of the last, the 20th century. They track different social changes, economic changes. They're a major source of historical and cultural knowledge about the 20th century. They're incredible plays in their own right. And this project of writing 10 plays, one set in each decade of the 20th century, is an incredible project. It's just an incredible idea. And to even have that good of an idea and then execute 10 excellent plays is remarkable. I mean, it's just, the Century Cycle is a remarkable collection of plays. It's hard to overstate how remarkable they are. As I said, though, this particular play is not set in Pittsburgh in that particular neighborhood. This play is set in Chicago. It's the only one of the group that happens to be set in Chicago instead. I suspect a lot of that comes from the fact that he based it on a real person, Ma Rainey, although that is just speculation on my part. The play premiered in a reading at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in 1982. That was directed by Lloyd Richards. Lloyd Richards, famous first black director on Broadway, famous director of the late 20th century, directed a lot of August Wilson stuff. It eventually opened fully at the Yale Rep in 1984, and that production transfers to Broadway at the Court Theater, gets nominated for a Tony. 1989, it has a production at the Royal National Theatre in the UK. There's a 2003 Broadway revival here in the US. Pretty famous Broadway revival with Whoopi Goldberg playing Ma Rainey. And then it goes on to have, I'll just sort of chart some things, some productions that happen. None of these are, this is not the end-all, be-all list or anything, but there's a 2004 UK revival at the Playhouse in Liverpool, 2010 production at the Arizona Theatre Company, 2011 at Milwaukee Rep, 2013 there's a reading, a sort of, I watched some clips of it. I'm not sure I would call it a reading, although maybe that's technically what it is. It's something between like a reading and like when they bring a full orchestra in to do like a sung through version of a musical and everybody's like standing at mics. It's like something between a reading and that, because there's a huge jazz band on stage in the green space to do the music. And then they also have actors at microphones doing the script. So that's a cool project, 2013. 2016 revival at the National Theatre in London. That production was so well received that it won an Olivier Award. 2016 Center Theatre Group in Los Angeles. 2016 Two Rivers Theatre in New Jersey. 2019 the Writers Theatre in Glencoe, Illinois. 2023 Circle Theatre in Grand Rapids. 2024 American Players Theatre in Wisconsin. And again, there are many other productions besides the ones I listed, but I wanted to note those theaters specifically for you to show the broad range of types of places that produced August Wilson plays and produced Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Some of those are very small ensemble theaters, community theaters. Some of those are Broadway and the National Theater. I mean, these plays get their fingers in everywhere because of how good they are and how culturally important and relevant and historically valuable they are. In 2025, this year, January and February at the Spring Opera House in Columbus, Georgia. January through March in Detroit at the Detroit Repertory Theater. March through April at the Arts-Centric Space in Baltimore. And May through June at the Actors Group in Honolulu. So still great productions of this play coming out. I think that my particular sense is that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom would be kind of a hard play to produce. So I'm really impressed by its sort of broad producibility, I guess, across the past, let's see, 82 to 24 is 40, now we're in 25, 43 years. I'm doing math on the fly there, but something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree that there's some really interesting technical elements of the play that call for, you know, some good musicians, some great actors, and a great set to go with it. So yeah, it's cool to see it get to be done.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's like technically complicated once the play starts, if that makes sense. Like on Curtain Up, it's just, you know, it's like as long as you have the actors and the musicians and you have the set, at that point they just do the play. And I mean, obviously I'm a director and actor, I know that's hard. But what I mean is like, it feels like the casting would be especially difficult, and the actual creation of the recording studio and band room in a way that suits the play seems really difficult. Like it's like pre-production difficult to produce, I think. As long as you find the people, you build the set, at that point, it's just a great August Wilson play. But it's that people and set that does seem a little hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, in 2020, of course, the film directed by George C. Wolfe, who's a great playwright and director in his own right. This is a part of a project that Denzel Washington is really heavily involved in to create films of in that particular but a lot just incredible of the century cycle. And now Viola Davis has Ma Rainey right and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, also great. She was nominated for an Oscar for it, as was Chadwick Boseman. Talk about him in a minute. The film did go on to win Oscars for costumes and makeup. It was nominated for 8 Critics' Circle Choice Awards, 9 NAACP Image Award nominations. Really well received for its faithfulness to the text, for what it does to be, it's just like gorgeous like film work. I'm not a film director, I'm a theater director, so I don't speak the language of film in the same way. But in terms of its like beauty, and then the way it contrasts beauty with some other stuff, like how sweaty the musicians get, for example. Like there's a real juxtaposition in the filmmaking that's just really, really incredible and much harder to do on stage. So I think, as many people probably know, Chadwick Boseman plays Levy in this production. Levy is an energetic, kind of riled up young trumpeter, as Jackson will tell you, and has some really stark things to say about his view of the world. I think probably I'm jumping ahead maybe into our conversation a little bit. My sense is that Levy's probably the protagonist of this play. Ma Rainey, though the title character doesn't appear until like more than a third of the way through the script, and has a much smaller stage time than Levy and the band members. And Levy gives, near the end of the play, a really impassioned monologue about his sense of how the Christian God, has turned his back on people of color in the United States for all the violence and pain they suffer. He's a really personal story about it, which I'm sure we'll get to. And again, as many of you know, probably, Chadwick Boseman died during post-production of this movie before it was released publicly. This was sort of a shock in my memory. I don't think, at least me as a member of the general public, I was not aware that Chadwick Boseman was sick in that way. And then he sort of died in the view of the public again, sort of suddenly. And then this movie comes out, and we see his last filmed performance, and it's stunning. It makes the movie like its own kind of experience, like it's. Now, when you watch the movie, you watch it with the knowledge that Chadwick Boseman was like dying as he was filming it. And the monologue about God turning his back, he stumbles around the band room and says, "Turn your back on me, turn your back on me." It's a stunning piece of film now, for all the reasons why it's a stunning piece of film, and for this particular story that surrounds it that's hard to escape. The film is dedicated to Chadwick Boseman. It's an incredible production. He and Davis won Screen Actor Guild Awards for both of their performances. But I think it's just like, it is hard now to separate the movie from Chadwick Boseman's life and death. Those are now kind of, I don't know if that'll be the case in 50 years or not, but right now, those are kind of intertwined stories. And it really, I don't know. It's such a unique, interesting thing. I don't know that I quite have the words for it. It's almost theatrical in the sense that there's like a live something else happening in engagement with the art.
Yeah. There's this kind of meta something going on that we as people who like love Chadwick's Boseman's performances and kind of that greater knowledge around him, and as it is sort of a weird encapsulated societal moment that is around that film in a really unique way. So definitely recommend checking out the film. And actually, that's a pretty good segue into my summary. If you've wrapped up the context, check out this play. Whether you're gonna go watch it, go read it, go see the movie, because I'm gonna summarize it and as best I can. But this is one of those unique plays that like every little piece of it moves the action forward. And so I'm going to kind of continue on our mile high summary sort of thing, and I'm surely going to miss some important stuff. So definitely check out this play. Check it out, because all the individual characters, all the individual scenes do move this plot along awesomely. So definitely check it out. As I prepare to summarize this play, also want to just take a second, as we often do, and kind of acknowledge our societal spot. We're two white guys talking about this play, and as such, that's going to necessarily inform some of what we say on the podcast. So we just encourage you to not let what we say be the last thing that you hear. You can find a lot of great resources about this play, conversations, interviews, all sorts of great things, and we'll probably link a couple of those down below. So definitely keep looking into this play and hearing more voices. We love getting to talk about theater's best scripts. We're going to continue to do so, and we'll love to be a spot to increase the conversation as well. Lastly, before I get into the summary, there is some sensitive content in this play, so that we're going to be talking about racism, sexism. There's some sexual assault in this play, so if those themes are not what you're needing to hear today, totally understandable. Check in with one of our other conversations, but we're going to jump into that conversation now. with a summary. So this play takes place in the 1920s, and it's focused on one day in a recording studio at Paramount Studios. This is the recording session for Ma Rainey. She is about to show up to kind of lay down this album, and we pick up the play kind of with the two people who are in the studio to start with. We got Sturtevant and Irvin. Irvin is Ma Rainey's manager, and Sturtevant is the kind of sound engineer for Paramount Studios. And they are notably the two white men in this play. And they are kind of setting up for this event, and slowly the band starts to trickle in. We get kind of up front that Sturtevant has some angst and is kind of upset with Ma Rainey and how she has treated the studio. But he's also trying to manipulate what she's doing in the studio. Irvin is also doing some manipulating on both sides, trying to keep everyone happy, kind of setting us up for that. One by one, the band begins to trickle in. We get Cutler and Toledo and Slow Drag. This is kind of the core of the band. We got Cutler, who's on rhythm guitar, sort of the de facto leader of the group. We have Toledo, who is the piano player, and then Slow Drag, who's on the bass. And one by one, they come in, they get the music, they kind of go to the rehearsal room and get ready to go. That's the starting cast for a chunk of the start of the play. They start to talk about the music and what music they're going to do. They start to note that there's some different versions of the songs that Irvin has given them, and we start to learn that Levy, who is the kind of trumpet player who's about to show up, has some other versions of the song, especially the title song, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. He's kind of worked up a trumpet intro in response to what the studio execs have been asking for, a little bit more of this sort of more jazz forward, trumpet forward music, and Levy has kind of presented an arrangement to start off the show. Levy eventually arrives. He shows up after having won some money, I believe, off of Slow Drag to go. He goes and buys some shoes to go impress Dusty May, who's going to show up later on in the play. And he shows up kind of late, and in one of what is many scenes in the play, the band sort of discusses how they're prepping for the recording session. And interwoven into that is a lot of discussion around the racism of the music industry and how they're adapting to that, and how they are kind of building towards recording this. But it's also mixed into it that Levy is kind of jostling for a bit more focus from this recording studio. Sturtevant has asked him to write a bunch of songs for him, and he's written this arrangement, and he's starting to kind of move to try to have his own band eventually. The other members of the band continually warn him that Ma Rainey's not going to like that, not going to like the arrangement, and he kind of says, well, I'm moving on up, and we'll kind of continues to push for his own band in that scenario. Eventually, an hour late, Ma Rainey does show up, and it turns out she's gotten into a car accident, and there was some threats thrown around from all sides, and a policeman showed up, essentially arrests Ma Rainey and her nephew, Sylvester, and Dusty May, who is kind of Ma Rainey's girl, the policeman shows up, having essentially arrested them, showed up at the studio, and Irvin has to pay off the policeman, bribe him off to kind of press no charges. But then Ma Rainey kind of takes over, and a lot of the rest of the action of the play, to briefly sum it up, is this great push and pull between Ma Rainey and the studio execs as they continue to not give her everything they said that they were going to give her. She keeps pushing for that. There's a great push and pull between her and the band as she says, no, we're doing the song my way. It's my song. And the band has some resistance against that. Levy especially has some resistance against that. The studio has some resistance against that, but she continues to push on it. She also instigates Sylvester, who I briefly mentioned, being the kind of spoken intro to the piece. It's this kind of like almost one of the characters says like a circus act sort of intro to the piece, to the recording. And so she pushes for him to be involved in that so that he gets some royalty payments. However, he has a stutter, and so the band is somewhat resistant to that because he can't get it right. The recording people are kind of resistant to that because he can't get it right. Ma Rainey insists over and over and over again. To sum up what is, again, just a masterwork of necessary plot action throughout the rest of the play, they eventually get to recording it. They try to lay down the track twice. Sylvester can't quite do it twice. He does it a third time. They think they got it. They did not get the recording. Again, there's more frustration as some people blame Levy, who all along the way has been very angry about the fact that Sylvester's in because that means his particular arrangement is out. But eventually they do get the track laid down. All along the way, trying to keep this plot kind of central as well. The band is continuing to discuss big topics and kind of significant lives of the characters sort of stuff. Especially Toledo and Levy have this back and forth. Toledo is kind of a well-learned man, and he kind of brings that sort of academic perspective to a lot of their conversations, whereas Levy is this kind of like lived experience sort of position. And so they go back and forth quite a lot, get into some pretty distinct fights. The whole band, though, takes a shot at Levy to the point that right before they record this final piece, Cutler and Levy come to blows over Levy's disrespect of God and Cutler's respect of God, to the point that they are kind of beating up on each other. Cutler's pulled off. Levy draws a knife, and that's the famous scene of Levy kind of stumbling around the room, yelling at God with the knife.
It's incredible, like writing on August Wilson's part. As he's stumbling around, he's like, "I'm calling on Cutler's God. I'm going to give Cutler's God a chance to save you." I mean, it's just like that's just so good. That's such good writing.
So good. Yeah. So to briefly sum up the end of the play, Ma Rainey gets the track laid down. They have a good recording session. They play a bunch of the songs, and they eventually we get to paying everyone out. There's one more negotiation between Ma Rainey and Studevant that she wins because they try to not pay Sylvester for the royalties, but she hasn't signed any of the releases yet, so she does get Sylvester paid, which is another great negotiation in this play. The final negotiation that we kind of get is Studevant is paying all the members of the band, and he goes up to Levy, and Levy says, "What do you think about the songs? Can I get some recordings done?" And Studevant backs completely away from it. He's like, "No, we're not gonna go that way. It's not what people want. I'll pay you $5 a piece for the songs, but you don't get to record them, and you don't really get to form a band around it." He kind of forces him into taking that money. And then the last bit of the play is Levy's also been fired from the band because he continues to fight with Ma Rainey throughout the whole process. Ma eventually fires him, so he gets fired by Ma Rainey. He gets this bad news from Studevant, and the kind of final beats of the play is him slowly just getting pressure cooked by all this stuff, and he continues to fight with Toledo, continues to fight with Cutler. Toledo steps on his shoe at the end of the play and breaks it, at least according to Levy, breaks his shoe, and that's like the straw that finally breaks whatever else is also happening to Levy. He targets Toledo and in a kind of rush of passion and anger stabs him and kills him. We quickly end the play on that image of him kind of holding Toledo as Cutler and Slowdrag go and try to report to Irvin what has happened, and Levy is left in that last moment of the loss of Toledo and the ramifications of what he's just done, but also been a part in over the course of this recording session.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me this play, while Ma Rainey is the title character, and I don't want to indicate that role is small in any way or not significant, but to me, the real story of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is the disintegration of Levy, who arrives at the beginning of the play like in triumph. Yeah. He's won money. He's purchased new shoes. Mr. Studevant is going to buy his songs and give him his own band. There's it's sort of a victory, right? There's a victory at the beginning, and slowly across the course of all these negotiations with the band, one thing you didn't say that seems important is that he gets fired by Ma Rainey at the end of their last recording session for sort of going up against her about his particular arrangement. And the disintegration of him across the course of the play to the point where he stabs another of the band members dead with his own knife. Certainly that's foreshadowed by the scene where he chases Cutler around the band room with his knife, threatening and right. calling on Cutler's God to come and save him. I mean, something is definitely going on with Levy that I'm not totally sure we get a ton of information on the outside pressures that might be on Levy at this moment. There's certainly a lot going on internally. The other thing that happens to Levy that is really a really painful part of the show. My sense is that it's about halfway through. I'll check that more specifically. Levy tells this story to the band after he feels they've kind of been nagging on him and they've been kind of poking fun at him for his interaction with the white studio owners. that they poke fun at him for kind of coming in with his hair on fire and then sort of yes-sirring the studio folks to get his music written. And out of that, Levy admits something, and we know that he has a long-standing relationship with these people. He's a touring member of the band, so they're not strangers. So this is something he's never told them before, a secret that he's finally revealing. And I teach in drama, lit, and playwright. Anytime a character does something they wouldn't otherwise do, that's important. And so Levy does something about halfway through the play that he wouldn't otherwise do, which is he tells them this story of his parents and his dad, leaving to take care of some stuff for a couple of days, leaving him at 8 years old as the quote unquote man of the house. And some of the white folks in their kind of farming neighborhood have been upset that a black man has purchased land in their area of the country. And so this group of white farmers come and really violently rape Levy's mother. And it's that image, that terrible trauma has stuck with him, of course, his whole life. And so that also, the admission of that then builds towards this moment later in the play where he calls on Cutler's God to come save him. And he retells the story about how his mother called on God to save her. And so the disintegration, you can sort of track that it does, like in a play that's about a recording studio and some tensions between a band, it can maybe seem a little startling that it ends with a murder. But I think if you track the disintegration of Levy, you can see the violence it's headed towards early on.
Yeah, definitely. The way all those storytelling moments work in those, there's lots of scenes, again summed up very quickly in the summary, but there's lots of scenes where like they get very close to recording and then have to step back for a time. And so there's all of these scenes that take place in the kind of band rehearsal room, that one being one of them, of this kind of revealing storytelling of the lives of Cutler, Toledo, Slow Drag, and Levy, and you get a lot of perspective on where they're coming from. Over and over, the critique of Levy is that he's kind of like trying to appease the Irvin, but especially Sturtevant, and I think that's those beats of storytelling go against whatever stereotype is being put on a character. Some stereotypes are being put on Toledo, often by other characters, and one by one, these moments of storytelling resist that, show another facet, show another piece of the story, and we get a lot more information about the pressures that are on all these characters as they try to navigate making music and the entertainment industry, but also just existing in America in the 1920s.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that the play has a little bit of a stop and start structure. Like it's really sort of built on like they're almost going to record and then they can't record. They're almost going to record and then they don't record. They're almost going to record until they don't record. Over and over and over. And August Wilson's showing off just his narrative chops in inventing tangible reasons that contribute to the character development, why continually the recording process is stopped. And that start and stop, like we're almost going to get there and then we don't, really is how the play is built in terms of its like structure. But what I really think is interesting about this play is I also think that is then mirrored in the violence. The violence of Levy towards either Toledo or Cutler, in the end it's Toledo, but it could have been Cutler, that is also kind of stop and start throughout the play. I think that there's an intentional mirroring being done between the music and the violence that Levy is going to visit at the end of the play. And, I think you finally get a beautiful big recording at the end of the play and then they wrap up for the day. And then, after Levy's fired, they go down to the band room and he kills him. And so I think when you achieve the recording, then the violence is ultimately sort of culminated as well. I just think that that's really kind of subtle, smart mirroring, this stop and start where all this, it's almost, it's foreshadowing a little bit, but it's almost like, the violence could have happened when he was waving the knife at Cutler down there, but it didn't quite. The recording could have happened, but it didn't quite. And then finally it does.
Yeah. There's this relief That is interesting then to track the relief that comes from actually having the recording done. You have this sense of relief finally, and then you have this sort of tragic reversal, whatever the opposite of relief is, maybe catharsis, probably catharsis, of the violence actually coming about as well. You kind of have like the sucker punch that is hand in hand with the relief of the recording actually happening.
Yeah. I think that mirroring too, this is like there probably are other plays with examples of this that I just can't come up with in the moment, but this is one of the like plays to me that like it has two locations, and the two locations moving back and forth between them is like really crucial to understanding how the play works and what's going on. You have these two spaces, the recording studio and the band room. Now, the movie, and I find this actually to be, I'm not that I really need to criticize George C. Wolfe or anything, but the movie takes it out into like the street around the recording studio a little. That to me, that I like the sort of simplicity of August Wilson's play script with the two locations a little more than that, because those two locations matter and impact the characters and advance the story. You know, there's a great playwriting analysis text, Visit to a Small Planet by Eleanor Fuse, and there's other texts are going to make the same point, that figuring out like what kind of a world do we live in, a public world or a private world of the play, is going to influence how the characters behave, whether they're out in public having to negotiate, manipulate basically for strangers or people with power watching them, or are they behind closed doors where there's vulnerability and intimacy and privacy, a public world versus a private world. To me, part of what August Wilson is doing in here is balancing the public world of the recording studio, where there are clear power brokers, there's a clear sort of arrangement of your societal role, with this band room, which is this kind of back room down in the basement. I think it's an interesting detail that's not much talked about, that they talk about how the band room's been moved since the last time they were there. And it's just this room where they go hang out, they rehearse, they talk. In the movie, there's like lockers and stuff there. I think that's in the stage directions of the play script as well. It's this like private room where the members of the band say and negotiate between each other in a way they don't and they couldn't in the public recording studio room.
Yeah, this sort of like incubative space that allows some things to be said away from both the way the producers behave, but also the way Ma Rainey behaves, because you have very different postures taken, especially by Cutler, when he's in that room versus when he's on stage. I think this play really highlights the best use of unity in terms of place and time. So the unity of place, having it in one place and for one, whatever it is, 4-hour period, really does push us to focus in on one particular thing, and then the relief of that one particular thing. So you have on stage, you have the room inside, you have time passing quickly, and the kind of pressure of it prompting the eventual climax of the show. So you have, I think, both of those just on full display in this play, of August Wilson's ability to use those two unities of time and place to really tell a necessary action-based story, and provide the stress or the strophe and antistrophe for those spaces of we're on here and we're in a safe space here, and how do we move between those spaces well.
Yeah, I think from the very beginning of the play, that action and that kind of push and pull is set up right away, right? Like the first conversation we see, you mentioned this in the synopsis, Irvin and whatever the recording studio guy.
Sturtevant.
Sturtevant, thank you. The conversation between them, basically, right, I mean, like 4 or 5 lines in, we get to this line. Listen, Irv, you keep her in line, okay? I'm holding you responsible for her if she starts any of her, right? So already we've got some like pretty racially charged power language being used to describe Ma Rainey, but also the setup that there's going to be a tension there, that there's a tension between Ma Rainey and the recording folks. And then, of course, August Wilson uses just some really classic, smart writing techniques. He delays Ma's entrance, right? This is, I mean, writers across millennium have used this. Somebody's missing. Somebody's not there. So we're waiting on somebody. We are waiting on Ma Rainey to get there. There's going to be tension when she gets there, we know. And we know that we're waiting on her. And we know that some of that tension is going to be about race and going to be about the fact that the white folks at the studio think that they can control her, that they can, quote, keep her in line, right? We know that that tension's coming. What I really think is smart, though, is that August Wilson, much more subtly, does that same thing to Levy. Levy also doesn't arrive with the rest of the band members.
Yeah.
He's also late. He also has a delayed entrance. And the characters talk and chatter a little bit about him. And right away when he comes in, there's tension. Whose version of the song are we going to do? The band has one sense of it about Ma Rainey's sort of wants, and Levy tries to side with studio owners or use their power to bring about what he wants, right? And so now there's tension between Levy and Ma Rainey and the band. And in that, you get this play that's sort of like a two antagonist, two protagonist structure. It's that mirroring dual structure. You have Ma Rainey versus the studio, and you have Levy versus Ma Rainey and the band.
Yeah.
And both of those battles are equally important. And then as we sort of been making the point all along, they're sort of mirrored and built on together.
Yeah. They progress. Yeah, they progress along the play simultaneously. I totally agree, and I'm glad that you said it the way that you said it, because it was going to be better than the way I was going to try to stumble my way into it. But like the Venn diagram of Ma Rainey as both protagonist and antagonist to Levy is such an interesting character, because you find yourself simultaneously, depending on what degree of on Levy's side you are in the many arguments that occur in the play, but you find yourself simultaneously being like, boy, she really rooting for her to find that last blow of, I'm not going to sign any of the releases until you pay me what you said you were going to pay me, is just like such a win, and you're so on board with
Huge
it.
victory, yeah.
Yeah, but then the like you can see, you can feel, I guess, more so what's going to happen to Levy as he continues down the path against Ma Rainey, and when she finally fires him, you're kind of in this moment of like, oh no,
this is where
now?
that moment is where the mirroring of this play is so well achieved. This is why August Wilson is a genius for moments like this, because earlier in the play, Ma Rainey has this scene, I think off the top of my head it's with Cutler, but I can't quite remember. And she's talking about basically why she's so tough on the studio folks. All along, she's been, I mean, they want things from her, and she gets her way every time. Once she's on stage, she gets her way every time. It's great how often they try to like pull a trump card. Over and over they try to, okay, this is the last time. And over she said, no, it's not. I'm just going to do whatever I want. Try whatever you want. I'm going to do whatever I want. So that's her interaction. It's just like, it's almost constant victory. And she has this conversation, again, I think it's with Cutler, where she basically tells him why. She says, listen, as soon as they have my voice on recording, they have what they want from me, and I don't have any power anymore. The power that I have is only in withholding my voice from them, right? And so then, when does she fire Levy? The second the recording is done. She does to Levy what she is worried, or not worried, but she describes that the studio owners want to do with her. So how does this mirroring work at the end? Levy does not have anything that he's held out on. When Ma Rainey threatens to fire Levy, he's just fired. He doesn't have the thing but Ma Rainey, when her recording is done, she hasn't signed the papers yet. So you see this, and it's just really subtle, brilliant mirroring at work of Ma Rainey with the studio owners and Levy with Ma Rainey. And the differences in how they try to hold and use power. Their experience in holding power, Levy's quite a bit younger than her. Ma Rainey is clearly much better at this than he is. It's not, I mean, it's certainly no joke, right? That she escapes going to jail at the beginning, and he's definitely going to jail at the end.
Right. Yeah, for sure. You see the kind of two ways of engaging, or ways of fighting powerful influence. And kind of fallout from both of them, and or success in the case of Ma Rainey. I think Ma Rainey leaves this like having won, which is kind of great, especially because we're about to enter a really tragic end of the play to kind of have that win. But yeah, I think the mirroring of them both together, traveling along, is just like makes the watching of it so interesting, because you're floating between whose side you're backing all the time and kind of wondering about whose side you're on all the time, all amidst these other characters who are like so tied into like Cutler and Ma Rainey have some really beautiful scenes. Toledo and Levy's just debates essentially throughout the play all like spark so much so much off of these two characters, and also trying to understand where Levy is eventually going to and what comes about of his stances.
Yeah, and I mean, in that incredible way that August Wilson weaves social and historical criticism into his plays, the different band members, of course, have sort of different worldviews and perspectives on a lot of things, religion and also race relations. There's a lot of discussion about like sort of where the conflict over race is in the United States at the time. There's a really painful story about a black preacher that I think is still a really remarkably powerful, perceptive, relevant, painful story. But, you know, a lot of that, I don't know that you and I are quite qualified to talk on the sort of inter-discussions in politics of how the band goes round and round. But I think it's worth like being really upfront and saying it's the vast majority of the play.
Yeah.
The play being called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom because of the song and because of the famous figure, and because like in terms of its spectacular weight, the performance of the music is spectacular and awesome, and certainly it's going to appear in all the advertisements for your show and stuff like that. However, I will say the band plays quite a bit of music themselves in the band room without Ma Rainey in their rehearsals.
Right.
And like just in stage time, the interpersonal not quite war, but tension, battle, conflict that's going on. All these band members and how they're working on Levy really is a lot of the play. And the three of them are like older black gentlemen who have really different lived experiences that they bring to the table. And certainly some of what August is doing is putting in place this younger black man who's sort of trying to come into his own in the world and negotiating with three different generational ways of living, including Ma Rainey's, if you include that as a fourth, right? And the different ways that those sort of start to pound and push on Levy. I found this to be a really interesting character description of Levy when August Wilson's plays are in that period where there's long character descriptions when they first appear on stage. And this was one, he's talking about Levy as a musician. He plays wrong notes frequently.
Yeah.
That's a startling little, because I think if you just like, if your eyes just skip that as you read the play, or if you're not musically inclined enough to be able to notice that, Levy is quite confident in his own musicianship. And you're rooting for him. So I find myself inclined to believe when he says like, I'm a great musician. I know it. I'm just trying to push the form. I'm trying to stretch things. And these older musicians are like, settle down, buddy. Let's play the music. It's not about you. So I find myself inclined to be like, well, they're old fuddy-duddies. And this young guy, he's got the talent and the skill. But I think that that note from August Wilson is really important. Levy is not all that he thinks he is.
Right. Yeah, the other stage direction is there, as he often gets his talent and his skill confused.
Yeah, oh, that's so good. That's so
the
good.
other one too. Of like they're both there and they're both present. It's just sometimes he doesn't like have the right one lined up for the moment. Honestly, each of the characters' descriptions as they come in gives so much life to the characters. I love August Wilson, like this era of theaters, like giving us like a nice little paragraph or a nice little couple lines about especially as someone who reads plays a lot. It's so great, and I love that it kind of cues us into what's going on with Levy and how and with Toledo too. Toledo has a great one of, I think it's is aware that the limitations of the piano are his own limitations.
Mm-hmm. He's the one that says often like, just play the music. Ma Rainey, after they record, celebrates him and gives him all kinds of praise, and he's just kind of like, I just played the music.
I just played the music. Yeah. There's so many great facets to this play. We like you could do a whole, like, certainly a paper's worth on Sylvester, and the impact of Sylvester on the plot of the play.
It's great.
And
The moment when he finally delivers the music intro successfully, even in the reading of it, is so delightful and celebratory, because immediately Ma Rainey launches into the song because they've done the intro successfully. So there's like a payoff to it. And as I've watched clips from live stage productions, it almost always seems to get applause. I mean, it's that much of a celebration that the character got through it and was successful and achieved it. And so you sort of see Ma Rainey's plan. You know, like, she seems a little aggressive and sort of combative a lot of the times in the play, but when you see how the plans work, you're just are amazed and impressed. This Sylvester, like, did it. You know, he succeeded and was successful. She was right, and she won him, you know, royalty money for it.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many great things there. We could focus on Dusty May. We could focus more on Slow Drag. So many more great scenes and individual parts of this play. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Read the play, see the play, watch the movie, and when you do, join the conversation again. We'd love to keep chatting about this play with all of you.
You know, there's not a lot of really, really good, faithful play to movie adaptions out there. Doubt is one of them that's really, really strong. Into the Heights, I think, is actually a really strong movie adaptation. And both Fences and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom with this project with Netflix are really, really faithful, strong, well-performed, beautiful renditions of the plays. If you're in any of those places that we mentioned in the context section, you can see it in the next couple of months live, and we always want you to see stuff live. But in this case, really, really watch the movie. If you have Netflix or you can access to it, it's a great movie. It's a moving, important piece of theater history, and still clearly is so relevant and speaks into right now in the way that only the genius writers can. And so just watch the movie. You'll get a lot of what is going on there, and then some other really awesome stuff that maybe you wouldn't get from a live performance. Some really great, I mean, you know, the benefits of film, the way that you can get close up on Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman's faces as they deliver these famous, historical, amazing lines is, I mean, it's unparalleled.
Absolutely. And when you have the chance to watch it and you're looking for someone to chat with, come and find us on all the socials, or at least some of the socials, at the username @NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites. We'd love to keep chatting about this play with all of you.
If you enjoyed this conversation on Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, if you enjoyed any of the conversations of season 14 so far, or our 13 other full seasons available online, recommend us to your family, your friends, the folks that you know in your life that like theater, that like discussions of scripts, but also things like writing, characters, stories, themes. They'd enjoy the podcast too. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, Podbean, all the places where you find your podcasts. You can like our Facebook page, and a link to the new episode appears every Monday when we publish. We'll be back next week with another conversation about another great script. Till then, I'm Jacob. I'm here with Jackson. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.